covering the world of professional wrestling. This is the Signature Spot with Chris Toplack.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you very much for joining me on the latest episode of The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. As always, I greatly appreciate your ongoing support. Where did January go? And for that matter, how did it get so damn cold? That polar vortex is legit. If you're in the Great White North, it's about minus 20 right now. And if you're not here, consider yourself blessed. It is brutal. In fact, I actually heard in Chicago, as of late, it's supposed to be colder there than it will be in Antarctica. Can you believe that? So I'm outside. I don't dress warmly when I shovel the snow. In fact, my neighbor said, "Wow, you're moving so quickly." It's because it motivates me to have to get my ass inside and stay warm. And I'm actually keeping warm in my AEW sweater. It is aesthetically pleasing, but again, it is very comfortable. You can check it out on ProWrestlingTees.com. I love the gear. I may even order a couple of shirts from there. I'm all on board the AEW train. And for that matter, still NXT and the WWE and New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I have apparel from all of those companies and it keeps me warm in the winter and cool in the summer. We're hot off the heels from an outstanding weekend of professional wrestling. That was NXT Takeover Phoenix, a tremendous show, and the Royal Rumble, which many said was either amazing or failed to live up to expectations. I personally thought it was entertaining. I'm going to recap both in great detail. And also the big question, what is going on with Dean Ambrose? Well, in fact, the topic of the week will focus on the Lunatic Fringe and what the future has in store for him.
Your weekly recap.
Let's start with NXT Takeover Phoenix, an outstanding event. I jumped off the couch on many occasions. The War Raiders put forth a stellar performance to become the new NXT Tag Team Champions. As predicted, the match lived up to expectations. It was a hot way to kick off the show. A fairly one-sided performance as well, too. I mean, the Undisputed Era held their own, but the War Raiders mostly dominated the action. And I must note the gap between NXT Tag Team Wrestling and the Tag Team Wrestling on Raw and SmackDown is enormous. And it really shouldn't be because the main roster certainly doesn't lack depth on the roster, but they simply aren't allowed to let loose and tell a proper story. And that's what we saw to kick off the show. And again, the two most important matches on a show, the opening match and the main event. Matt Riddle defeated Cassius Ohno in a much more competitive match than their previous NXT TakeOver encounter. The intangible it factor is often discussed. Few actually possess it. Matt Riddle has it. He's going to be a bona fide superstar to come for many, many years. Johnny Gargano, this was unexpected, became the new NXT North American champion in an instant classic, already a match of the year candidate with Ricochet. No match that entire weekend, and again, perhaps throughout the entire duration of 2019 will surpass this barn burner. And I'm going to go on the record and say Ricochet just might be the most innovative wrestler I've witnessed over the past 20 years. It was nonstop action. It felt more like a video game, but it was in fact reality. Sign me up for that one again. Shayna Baszler retained her NXT Women's Championship. The numbers were simply too much for Bianca Belair to overcome. And how about Sam Roberts stating on the pre-show that Bianca Belair did not belong on this card. In fact, actually devalued the card by being on it. I don't know if they have some past beef or what the case is, but I felt as though she rose to the occasion and delivered on the big stage. But once again, the Horsewomen gave Shayna Baszler the victory. She took advantage of it and, of course, forced Bianca Belair to pass out, and that was it. And then in the main event, Tommaso Ciampa retained the NXT Championship after taking advantage of Black's knee injury. During that final sequence, you had Aleister Black attempt to hit Black Mass. His knee basically gave out. Tommaso Ciampa took advantage and again, he got his arm raised. Now, NXT TakeOver concluded with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa lifting their respective titles over their heads, and I believe it was the perfect conclusion to NXT TakeOver. I still have this sneaking suspicion that there's another layer to the story, and Johnny Gargano is drawing him in, building that trust, and he will in fact become the puppet master, exact his revenge, and finally, that will conclude the feud. But time will tell if that's actually going to occur. Then we had the Royal Rumble, all nearly 7 hours of it, far too drawn out. But nevertheless, it was still pretty enjoyable. You had Rude and Chad Gable defeat the very odd pairing of Razar and Scott Dawson in a non-title match. I took several unnecessary trips to the kitchen during this match. I just made up any excuse I could. Then Nakamura became the new United States champion after Rusev accidentally bumped into Lana. Now, mind you, when that occurred, I figured this is the perfect opportunity for later on we'll see Becky Lynch take her place, which, as you know, became a reality. Originally, I found it somewhat depressing how Nakamura went from winning the men's Royal Rumble in 2018 to performing on a pre-show, but he actually did make the Royal Rumble match, so I thought, okay, not as bad. Buddy Murphy retained his WWE Cruiserweight Championship after pinning Hideo Itami with Murphy's Law. It was a solid effort all around, a very slick finisher, I should add, too. And hopefully this generates a little bit more interest in 205 Live, and deservingly so. As expected, Asuka retained her SmackDown Women's Championship by forcing Becky Lynch to tap out. Now, that was the genuine surprise, that Becky Lynch lost in that fashion. I thought perhaps a pinfall, a countout, a DQ finish, but not tapping out. Nevertheless, it was an amazing match to kick off the main card. What a treat. Asuka and Becky Lynch are two of the most believable superstars on the main roster, and that does include the men as well. But don't worry, Becky Lynch redeems herself later on. Following a shooting star press from a nearly 50-year-old Shane McMahon, Shane O'Mac and The Miz became the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. You have to feel some sympathy for the Bar. This has been a mildly amusing storyline that has stretched out maybe a little bit too far, but nevertheless, I'm intrigued to see where it goes. Ronda Rousey pinned Sasha Banks to retain the Raw Women's Championship, but it was easily her toughest test to date. Sasha made the baddest woman on the planet look extremely vulnerable and wrote the blueprint in order for somebody, wink wink, to eventually defeat Ronda. Now, Sasha also displayed a sign of respect by shaking Ronda's hand, but immediately flashed the old 4 horsewomen hand gesture, perhaps a sign of things to come. Becky Lynch replaced an injured Lana, as predicted, and eliminated Charlotte Flair on one good leg to win the 2019 Women's Royal Rumble. It was a predictable yet very satisfying finish. The first 3 quarters of the match was undeniably underwhelming, but the final 5 minutes really made up for it. And I was really humbly surprised to see some of the NXT superstars featured over legends. Sadly, it mostly fell on deaf ears just due to a poorly booked match. But nevertheless, I wanted to kind of highlight a few individuals, including Natalya, who entered the match at number 2, and she lasted 56 minutes. But then on the flip side, she eliminated Liv Morgan, who only lasted 8 seconds. Ember Moon, who actually injured her arm during this match, lasted 52 minutes, and Charlotte Flair, who was the runner-up, lasted 50 minutes. Now, from NXT, you had Kairi Sane, Candice LeRae, you had Casey, Io Shirai, Rhea Ripley, just to name a few. So again, it was nice to see them building the future. Same with Lacey Evans and Nikki Cross. So it felt as though many individuals had their moment to shine. A vicious chokeslam, courtesy of Eric Rowan, who was in his hipster apparel, led Daniel Bryan to victory as he remains the WWE champion. Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles was a great match that deserved a far better audience. I would have loved to see it anywhere but Phoenix because they were just sitting on their hands. It told a very compelling story that was lost on the exhausted and disinterested Chase Field crowd. Also, I love the fact Bryan received a bodyguard, as it will further enhance his heel persona. Brock Lesnar caught Finn Balor in a Kimura lock and forced the leader of the Balor Club to tap out. When Brock Lesnar puts on his working boots, he's incredible because his matches with AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan and now Finn have been terrific. And even though Finn Balor lost the match, in many ways he still kind of won the war because he stood toe-to-toe with the Beast and he gave him one hell of a fight. So Finn Balor's stock certainly does not drop very much after this defeat. And then, of course, Seth Rollins won the 2019 Men's Royal Rumble, but the match was not without its flaws at times. Now, I did love the fact, yet again, that many NXT stars made appearances. Nothing against the likes of Tatanka and DDP, but I don't need to see them in the Royal Rumble anymore because they'll last a couple of minutes, they'll have that nostalgia pop, and then they'll be thrown over the top ropes. You need to prepare for the future. So in this case, it was great to see some very reputable NXT stars in the match, such as Johnny Gargano, Pete Dunne, and Aleister Black. I mean, those are three names I would bank the future of the company on at this point. Not a lot of surprises, though. I mean, that's the one downfall of the match. And by the way, who made the decision to add Nia Jax to the match? I'm not saying that I disliked it or even hated it. I just don't necessarily know the context of it. Also, was it me? Or did it feel like many of the eliminations, not even just in the men's match, but the women's match, were completely missed by the camera crew? Normally, the camera crew are fantastic. I mean, they're beyond stellar, but in this case, it was just very sloppy work. I mean, you'd cut to a random shot of Michael Cole would just state, oh, so-and-so's been eliminated. And I thought, I missed it. Where's the shot? I don't even know what's happening here. So wanted to go over who lasted the longest and who didn't last very long at all. We'll start with the shortest. It was No Way Jose, a mere 2 seconds. He went back to the conga line. Xavier Woods only lasted 3 seconds, and Titus O'Neil only lasted 5. Seth Rollins ultimately winning was the Iron Man at 43 minutes and 26 seconds. Also great outing for Andrade, who I believe is going to be a massive star in the future, and also an individual who received a great spotlight in this match to shine was Mustafa Ali, lasting 30 minutes, even eliminating Samoa Joe. I also love the early spot with Elias and Double J, Jeff Jarrett. So overall, it was a pretty entertaining match, much like the Women's Royal Rumble, a predictable yet satisfying finish. So overall, I thought the Royal Rumble delivered, but if I had to rank the two, NXT TakeOver Phoenix, again, raised the bar much higher, as if there was any doubt about it. Raw opened with a very emotional Seth Rollins cutting a promo where you could clearly hear the passion in his voice, even teared up. Triple H shared a nice little moment with Seth, who's basically his prodigy, and suggested he needs to make his WrestleMania decision by the conclusion of Raw. Dean Ambrose interrupted, crashed the party, teased Triple H, wanted a match with Seth Rollins. It was granted. Not only did Dean Ambrose lose, but Nia Jax, for whatever reason, bullied him around. No idea what this accomplished, although in the topic of the week, focusing on Dean Ambrose, perhaps there is a tie-in there. And then the team of Nia Jax and Tamina advanced to the Elimination Chamber to compete for the Women's Tag Team Championships. I would have preferred Bliss and James in that position, but I understand why they want the dominant team of Jax and Tamina there. For the first time since his one-sided loss to Drew McIntyre, Kurt Angle returned to Raw and lost to Baron Corbin clean. A little puzzling. I believe they are positioning Kurt in a do-or-die situation at WrestleMania, perhaps even his final match, to prove he hasn't lost a step. Finn Balor appeared in front of the live crowd, but left his smile and typical entrance behind, clearly disappointed by his performance against Lesnar. Lashley appeared with Leo Rush, and they attacked Finn Balor, perhaps leading to an intercontinental title match down the road. I'm not judging your taste in music, but if you choose Maroon 5 over the Velveteen Dream, Aleister Black, and Ricochet versus Adam Cole, Bebe, Johnny Wrestling, a.k.a. Johnny Takeover, a.k.a. Johnny Gargano, and Tommaso Ciampa for halftime heat, I revoke your wrestling fan status, because that is going to be a bonkers match worthy of your attention, especially far more deserving of your attention than Maroon 5. Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder, by the way, who host a podcast, the major wrestling podcast. It's all about toys, if you can believe it or not, and it's actually somewhat compelling, teamed up in a losing effort against the Revivals, Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder. It was nice to see Kurt Hawkins being taken seriously, but once he breaks that losing streak, the crowd will most certainly pop. I'm glad it was not on Raw. They need to build to that crescendo. And we were treated to Jeff Jarrett and Road Dogg, Jesse James performing With My Baby Tonight. But Elias put an abrupt end to the performance, smashing both over the back with guitars. This further signifies his heel status. Again, it's still head-scratching logic to me that they would take somebody who was so over as a babyface and just relegate him back to that heel status. He was getting somewhere. Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan advanced to the Elimination Chamber match by defeating Natalya and Dana Brooke. Just to recap, Dana Brooke claims she's a better wrestler than both Ember Moon and Natalya. How Natty kept a straight face after hearing that was truly beyond me. Ronda Rousey appeared for her open challenge and received a pretty mixed reaction from the live crowd. It was evident that it threw her off because it made for a very awkward segment. Bayley answered the call. It was a very entertaining match, and I really wish that after losing the match, Bayley would shake Ronda's hand and then flash the four fingers, just as Sasha did the evening prior. Becky Lynch showed up to a massive reaction and officially challenged Ronda at WrestleMania 35. The verbal sparring continued, with Lynch, of course, getting the upper hand. Ronda simply falters in comparison. Then we had Strowman and McIntyre. That ended in DQ after Corbin injected himself into the match. And Seth Rollins officially chose Brock Lesnar as his WrestleMania opponent, but it led to 6 F5s. Honestly, it was overkill, and it diminished the power of the move since Rollins kept getting up. It's only fitting that the man kicked off SmackDown Live, but with Charlotte Flair showing up, it would be a very poor decision if she somehow weasels her way into the match between Becky and Ronda at WrestleMania 35. I really hope they keep it a singles match and then Charlotte goes on to challenge Asuka. And you know what? When you take credit for the success of Becky Lynch, you can expect a knuckle sandwich, and that is what Becky delivered to Charlotte Flair. R-Truth and Curtis Axel have much in common. They both never entered the Royal Rumble and technically were never eliminated. Well, Curtis Axel eventually was, but still, R-Truth technically wasn't. But after a pretty awful 3 count, I watched the replay on many occasions. I did see Nakamura get his shoulders up. R-Truth is the new United States champion. I was surprised we did not see a dance break. And then he defeated Rusev as well, but the one confusing part was Rusev was cutting a promo about how the United States Championship deserves better than Nakamura, but then he also basically was insinuating like, hey, let's be friends, but just this one time, and then that's it. So all of that occurred, and then they brought out The Miz's dad. I'm assuming it was purposely supposed to be hokey because that's how it came off on television. Well, there was a big tag team match to determine the number 1 contenders for those SmackDown Tag Team Championships, and it will be the Usos. And I was really hoping the Usos would have run down and dished out some well-placed super kicks to all parties involved. Now, let me get this straight. So, Nia Jax and Tamina in the Riot Squad were both forced to win qualifying matches to earn the right to compete in the Women's Tag Team Championship match at the Elimination Chamber. But Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville simply declare themselves involved, and they're automatically in. All the other female tag teams should just say, screw it, I'm not going into a qualifying match. I'm in. Just consider me in, and then I'm good to go. Daniel Bryan introduced his organic, sustainable hemp WWE Championship. He said it was milled from fallen oak, and there were even some earth stones in it. Yeah, you know what? It's supposed to be over the top and theatrical, but I enjoyed it. So who is Daniel Bryan going to face for this championship? Well, it's going to be Randy Orton, Mustafa Ali, Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles, and Samoa Joe in the Elimination Chamber. It should be worth noting that Samoa Joe, in his very limited time on the mic, absolutely delivered. There is simply no one more believable than Samoa Joe.
The latest industry news and rumors.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it's had the industry buzzing. The biggest news of the week, Dean Ambrose is apparently set to be a free agent at the end of April. It was first reported by Wade Keller of the PW Torch. He even met with Vince McMahon to inform him himself in person. And apparently he's not seeking any more money, and he's not interested in future negotiations. Many have speculated that perhaps this is actually a storyline, but it's looking pretty official. So later on, I'll be joined by editor-in-chief of the Gorilla Position and contributor to Fansided.com, Ryan Boman, to further discuss this groundbreaking announcement. Ember Moon is out of action. Fresh off an incredible Royal Rumble performance that saw her last over 50 minutes, Ember Moon will be out of action after suffering an elbow injury that requires immediate surgery. Here's what she had to say. Sadly, I messed up my elbow really bad, and now I have to have immediate surgery. It's hard to be here right now and see everyone compete knowing I'm on the shelf. I don't know how long, but it is a while. So wishing her the best. She's one of my favorite female performers on the roster, so hope to see her in the ring very shortly. Impact Wrestling and Major League Wrestling, aka MLW, announced somewhat of a partnership. They will be collaborating for their shows on April the 4th. That is WrestleMania weekend, although this is taking place specifically on a Thursday. So they will be coordinating talent, and basically they want to ensure that fans can attend both events. So MLW will have Rise of the Renegades taking place on April the 4th at 7 p.m. You can get tickets at MLWtickets.com. And then also you have Impact Wrestling. They have United We Stand. It's at the Rahway Recreation Center. That's in Rahway, New Jersey. You can order tickets on ImpactWrestling.com. That's taking place at 11 p.m. And of course, you can stream it on twitch.tv/Impact Wrestling. So between those two shows, all the independent shows, the ROH and New Japan Pro Wrestling show, NXT Takeover, and WrestleMania, it's going to be an incredible weekend in the New York area. Can't say this news comes as a surprise, but apparently Hideo Itami is finished with the WWE. In fact, his final WWE appearance was this past Tuesday on 205 Live, according to Fightful.com. And PWI Insider, it's being reported that he requested his release from the company, and soon enough, it will be granted. So unfortunately, Hideo Itami just really failed to connect in the WWE universe. He entered NXT with huge expectations because he came over as Kenta. He made his name for himself in Japan and elsewhere around the world, but injuries plagued him, and when he returned, he just wasn't quite the same. So I'm hoping that he returns back to his roots as Kenta, either in New Japan or perhaps in another promotion, and reclaims that past glory. I mentioned Impact Wrestling earlier, and certainly they're making an impact in the WWE as they reportedly signed Shane Helms and Jeff Jarrett in the roles of backstage producers. This is fresh off the heels of Abyss and Sanjay Dutt being hired for the same roles. A lot of this has to do with Jeremy Borash bringing in individuals he trusts and has a lot of respect for, and I believe all four of those individuals were great calls. It was speculated that Lars Sullivan was initially scheduled to debut on Raw several weeks ago, but bouts with anxiety and depression forced him to miss the date. A representative on his Twitter account shed some light on this, stating, "There has been a lot of speculation about Lars recently. It's true. He went missing several weeks ago, and I was just able to contact him this morning. Lars wants everyone to know he's in a good place, and he's sorry to everyone he's disappointed." Triple H recently on a media call also stated that Lars will be just fine. Coming up next, I'm joined by editor-in-chief of the Gorilla Position, contributor to Fansided.com, Ryan Boman, as we discuss Dean Ambrose and what is happening with his future.
Our topic of the week.
It was first reported by Wade Keller of PW Torch that Dean Ambrose, a.k.a. Jonathan Good, rejected a WWE contract. It is set to become a free agent at the end of April. Furthermore, Ambrose apparently met with Vince McMahon to inform him. Ambrose was not seeking more money and is not interested in further negotiations. The speculation turned out to be true, as the WWE released the following statement on Tuesday. Dean Ambrose, aka Jonathan Good, will not be renewing his contract with WWE when it expires in April. We are grateful and appreciative of all that Dean has given to WWE and our fans. We wish him well and hope that one day Dean will return to WWE. This begs a much more important question. Given Dean's interaction with Triple H on Raw, could this merely be done for storyline purposes, or is it legitimate? Ryan Boman, editor-in-chief of thegorillaposition.com and contributor of fansided.com, joins me. What do you make of the situation?
Well, I know what I believe, and I believe that it has to be one heck of a lot of frustration to turn down what is rumored to be well over $5 million over 5 years.
Okay. At first, you shocked me here. I was going to say that's like Brock Lesnar territory in terms of the dollar figure for an annual basis, but over 5 years, that actually does seem pretty logical that it'd be about $1 million per year, right?
Yeah, 7-figure salary. The number that I saw, and I'm not sure, I'm not reporting this, I don't know if it's absolutely true, was 5.65 with an escalating deal over 5 years, where by escalating meaning each year it would elevate her up and go to the next level. I don't know if that's true or not, but if he did turn in that deal, then that means he's either really angry or this whole thing is a work, which has been speculated on by a lot of people.
Well, there's a lot of that speculation that feels from the fact that we had Nia Jax that confronted him on Raw. We had, of course, that relatively early exit at the Royal Rumble due to a black mass, well timed, by the way, by Aleister Black. And then, of course, as well, too, he lost cleanly to Seth Rollins and also had that interaction that could be a bit of a red herring. Maybe we're looking into this much too far with Triple H on Raw. So many are looking at that full scope, plus the return that has been somewhat lackluster, just the poor booking in general, and thinking maybe they just gave up on him, maybe he gave up on them.
You know, when you look at it, I mean, in a lot of ways, it might be a really good thing for Dean Ambrose to take a break from WWE and reinvent himself and come back. There's always those possibilities out there. At the same time, you know, we just had the whole situation with Dolph Ziggler where it was the will he, won't he, and then he popped up at the Rumble. So you have to wonder how much they're trying to work the fans. My red flag on the whole thing is that they announced this 3 months ahead of him leaving, which means they've given up the idea of that maybe we can work something out, maybe we can get an extension done. You know, I just find that I think is where people are skeptical about this announcement, is the fact that they've done it so far out from him actually leaving the company.
But do you also think that they're interjecting that realism by saying, I'd rather the world hear it from us than from the dirt sheet, so to speak?
No, I think that's absolutely a possibility. I'm not calling this a work right out of the chute. I'm saying that it's a very odd situation. If this actually is his departure, it's got to be one of the strangest ones I've ever seen in terms of WWE, at least in light of them becoming a corporate company now and doing things through a certain process. The biggest stars, one of their biggest homegrown, home cultivated stars they've ever had, and to do this in the manner that they're doing it is really odd.
Well, he's also been with the WWE, I believe, since about 2011. He was in FCW, of course, in NXT for a very brief period, called up to the main roster with the Shield. And since then, he's been arguably one of the most popular members on the WWE roster, both as a babyface, where I thought that he was fairly ineffective, just due to poor booking, and then especially as a conniving heel.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of odd to think that he was so hot as a member of the Shield, but as a solo artist, so to speak, he just can't get a hit. And I think that that's one of the funniest things, is even putting the title on him at one time. He just kind of has always been stale when he's been out there on his own. If he's not in a feud with a member of the Shield, or he's not actually a member of the Shield, he's just sort of floundered out there on his own.
And we even saw that on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast on the WWE Network, where Stone Cold basically called him out, almost questioning his passion, because he was just very nonchalant and laid back, which, by the way, apparently is his personality in reality. So it kind of rubbed, at least to me, rubbed Steve Austin the wrong way. And he was thinking, if you're the world champion, if you're a main eventer, where's the fire in you?
And maybe that's something he can rediscover if he leaves the company and goes out there and takes on a new persona. I mean, we've seen this happen with people like Cody and people like Pac, people like even someone who had come through the NXT ranks like Sami Callihan, who never made a name for himself until he went out and forged his own way out on the independent level. Maybe that's the next step. Maybe that's the evolution of Jonathan Good,
Yes.
Dean Ambrose, Jonathan Moxley, whatever you want to call his name, whatever his name is out there. Maybe that's the next stage of his career.
So if you had to put money on it, based on all that we've seen, and again, this is purely speculation, Ryan, would you consider this legitimate? That they have just said, we're just going to get the news out there before it just leaks everywhere else? Or do you think this was done for storyline purposes, that they're actually, and very similar to like a CM Punk situation, right? That they're going to reel him back in and then have him feud with the McMahons, which seems to be logical, and then he'll be that agent of chaos again.
I think it could very much be like what you're talking about, a Punk type of situation, and it could blow up in their face in the long run, and he could end up leaving like Punk did, where I think at that time the company thought, well, we'll always have Punk as sort of a fringe character, and we can play off of that. And then he just finally bolted. I don't know. I don't really know where Ambrose stands as far as the company. I wish like I said, this is so bizarre to me, the way that they've gone about this and the procedure that they've gone through with it, that I wish I had the answer to this. My personal feeling is I truly hope that he does take that leap and go out there and try something different, because right now he doesn't do much for me in the WWE.
The area, or the time frame, I should say, where I saw the most frustration from Dean Ambrose up until this point, I believe was WrestleMania 32. If you recall, he had that match with Brock Lesnar. Apparently, Brock did not want to play ball. He did not put on his working boots. And Dean Ambrose was literally miserable in that match. And I really think that since then, we've seen him almost demotivated, bitter, angry. Again, perhaps I'm overanalyzing here, but I've always seen Dean Ambrose, perhaps as a human being, where he's never voiced his concerns too much with upper management, or he's never proposed different storylines or different directions. Maybe he has. Maybe I'm completely wrong and misaligned with my thoughts here, but he hasn't done that. And rather, he's just saying, I give up. I've done everything I could. I don't need the money. I'll just go reinvent myself elsewhere as Jon Moxley.
Well, I kind of thought about this today, and I'll throw this one at you, Chris. And I haven't even mentioned this to anyone yet, but he's in his mid-30s right now. He's a little bit younger, but kind of in that same stage of his career as Scott Hall was when he made the jump to WCW, where he gave up the gimmick, he gave up the Razor Ramon name, and he forged out on his own as Scott Hall in a whole new world where there was more money and there was a new spotlight being shown. And maybe if Ambrose decides that he is actually leaving WWE, if this is not a work and he has a landing spot, maybe AEW is a place where he puts the Moxley character, or he puts his own name over, whatever. But maybe he spreads like Scott Hall did, like Kevin Nash did, where they have established themselves as a character in WWE, but now it's time to go out and branch out and try something else.
Funny that you bring that up, because I was just reading earlier that he still maintains a great relationship with both Cody Rhodes and Chris Jericho. So my next question to that is, you're Dean Ambrose, you're Jonathan Good, you're Jon Moxley. You have the ability, because he would be the belle of the ball, right? Where do you sign? Because we have Impact and MLW, we have ROH, we have New Japan Pro Wrestling, which should not go understated. And then, of course, you have AEW. If you're him in his shoes, where do you go from a standpoint of exposure to be the guy and also to grow as a performer?
Well, I get killed all the time for already jumping aboard the AEW bandwagon, but from the sounds of it, the only company out there that's going to be able to give him a contract that's going to be competitive to what he would have gotten in WWE is probably All Elite Wrestling. So I would, if I were him, my biggest career option, my biggest springboard would probably be trying to make a splash with that new company and taking the guaranteed money there.
I think that makes sense. The guaranteed money is there. The opportunities are there. The fact that he could lure over some of his friends if he starts to do relatively well there, which I assume that he would, because Dean Ambrose, or again, as John Moxley, he always rose to the occasion. He had more of a reputation as a hardcore wrestler. But I think given wrestling that WWE style, he can transition very well into AEW.
Yeah, and I honestly believe that if the money numbers, as we all know in wrestling, they always get inflated.
They do.
But I think if they're anywhere near what he actually turned down, then wherever he goes, it means a lot more to him about what he's going to do as a wrestler. I think it means more about what kind of schedule he's going to have. And I think it means more about what his legacy is going to be when his career's over. I think if he truly walked away from WWE with that kind of money being waved in front of his face, then it's more about who he's going to be when it's all said and done. And if that's the case, then God bless him, because that's a lot of money to walk away from.
No kidding. Now, it's funny because I was actually reading in a couple other places, how is this going to impact Renee Young? And my rebuttal to that is it's not going to impact her at all, because she has a long, bright future with the company, and it's not going to hold her back whatsoever. If anything, she's going to be supportive. She actually posted on Instagram a photo of him. This guy, the world is yours, my love, no guts, no glory. I thought that was a great little message.
I agree. And there's a lot of wrestling couples out there where one works for one company and the other. I mean, I can right now name Jordan Grace is in Impact and John Gresham is in Ring of Honor, and they recently got engaged. There are a lot of couples who work for different wrestling companies. The one tie that binds them is that they're all part of the wrestling industry and all part of the wrestling family. And at the end of the day, everybody crosses paths, no matter who they're signed to or who they're under contract to. We just saw that last week in Las Vegas, where Eli Drake and Taya Valkyrie were palling around with The Undertaker. So it's not like these people can't talk or can't cross paths or they can't live in the same house just because they work for different companies.
So 2 quick questions. I want to touch back on that AEW speculation. So let's say he does sign. I mean, obviously, a massive loss for the WWE, and for the fact that they're already slightly nervous about a new upstart company with substantial financial backing. If you're them, what's your position now? Because you're thinking that others are going to follow suit too, inevitably.
I think right now, if you're WWE, you have to play it cool, and I think that you really do have to focus on developing new stars. They've been through this before. This is not their first roller coaster ride. They went through this with WCW signing away stars, and they did the exact same thing that I said. They went out and they cultivated new stars. They have a great farm system with NXT. They have homegrown talent
The
right
best,
now.
I should say. The absolute best on the planet. And I've mentioned this recently, is that I believe the future is more hopeful now than it's been in probably well over a decade with the current cream of the crop they have in NXT, the best I've seen in quite some time.
They are much more fortified and ready to reload. Back in the 90s when WCW signed away all that talent, they didn't have a farm system.
No.
Now they do. They could lose literally 2 or 3 top stars and replenish the roster that quickly because they have homegrown talent down in NXT. I think they're in a good place. I think wrestling overall is in a good place. When WWE is strong, wrestling is strong. But when WWE has competition, wrestling is even stronger.
Absolutely. Now let's look at the flip side, and then I'll let you go. I really appreciate you joining me here. Let's say that this is not legitimate. It's a complete work. This is a storyline. How would this unfold in the WWE, at least if you were backstage as a producer or a writer and you knew of this going on? How would you basically set this for the next 3 to 6 months?
I'd take him off TV for sure. I would definitely not expose him at all on television. I would make it look like that he is absolutely cutting ties. We're not going to book him. He's not going to be part of WrestleMania. Anything, we're just going to let him sit at home. And I would leave it like that. And then I would have him pop the crowd by showing up randomly. I don't know, probably at Mania would be the best way to do it. Getting involved in one of the main events or some sort of high profile match. But, honestly, at this point, if this is a work, if they've gone out of their way to try to work, I mean, you're kind of working your stockholders at this point, because this is one of your biggest stars in your company. This is someone that you bank on to make you money, and now you're releasing public statements saying they're gone. Again, if it is a work, I think it's more egg on their face. It's more of them being very misguided in what they think is going to get the wrestling crowd worked up. Because if it turns out to be a joke on all of us, I think it's just going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they have a couple different options that they can go about doing this. I think the first one is that Punk option, which is keep him off television. That was one that they could have extended much longer. That was following his victory at Money in the Bank back in 2011. He won the match. He disappeared. He threw the belt in the fridge. And then he kind of just removed himself, but then later appeared at a Comic-Con. If you recall, it was during like this big panel, and he showed up and said, I have a question, and it was unbelievable. Go back and watch the video. The crowd pops. It was super unexpected. It looked like a pretty genuine interaction between him and Triple H. Basically, Triple H saying, please come back. You know, it's a different ball game, different rules. And he's like, I'll think about it. So they could go that route. The other route is that he shows up and just absolutely terrorizes the WWE, and the McMahons don't know what to do with this rabid dog.
No, I think that there's potential as far as storyline, but at the same time, I think that WWE's almost painted themselves into a corner now that there's a lot of backlash when they try to fool the fans now. And I think now it's almost like the fan base expects better of them than that. So if it turns out that they've kind of let the people know, hey, you're not going to have Ambrose anymore, and then, haha, we fooled you. I just think, again, I think it really is going to leave a bad taste in the audience's mouth. I don't know if there's much saving that. And at the same time, we already tried this whole shocking thing with Ambrose when he turned heel on the night that Roman announced his illness. How much more swerviness can we give this guy before we kind of give up on the fact that maybe the crowds or the audience just really isn't into him? I just think if this turns out to be a swerve, it's going to backfire on him.
We both know the only true bearer of the truth is time, and time will let us know exactly what is reality and what is fiction. He's Ryan Boman, editor-in-chief of the GorillaPosition.com and also contributor to Fansided.com. As always, thanks for joining me on the program.
Thanks so much, Chris.
You're listening to The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack.
I don't know about you, but it feels as though we covered a lot on this program today, from the numerous recaps to industry news and rumors to the Dean Ambrose situation, which I'm watching very intently. I still feel as though I'm not fully caught up. I still have NXT, 205 Live, so on and so forth. The grind never stops. But thank you very much for tuning in and continuing to support the show and spread the word. If you would be so kind, tell your friends, family, and fellow wrestling fans to tune in to The Signature Spot on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next Thursday, happy trails to you until we meet again.
This concludes another episode of The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. For new episodes, subscribe on YouTube, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or iTunes. And don't forget to follow The Signature Spot on Facebook for exclusive clips, polls, and opinions.